Chapter 15. A true hunter must know what weapons to use for each creature. A hunter does not go after a small bird with a tree stump, or attack a running buffalo with only his fists. But even with the correct weapon, the ultimate outcome always turns on the ability of the hunter to outthink his prey. Nakai's heart had stopped racing, and he had caught his breath long before he reached the outside perimeter of the army encampment. Before he went in, he finished off the third bottle of water, figuring after his near miss in the desert, he needed it. The army had decided to set up their headquarters in a small valley, just above where Cole Army Base used to be. Even in the moonlight, he could see the changes. The desert glittered like a billion stars, the sand fused by the intense heat of the explosion into a field of glass globules reflecting the moon. Nakai would have thought they'd have set up the camp farther away, but apparently those in charge knew more than he did. He climbed silently up towards a shallow saddle among some large rocks. 2 guards sat near a fire. The smell of coffee filled the night, making Nakai's stomach rumble slightly. Except for the blue plate special at Rosalita's, he hadn't eaten anything at all for almost 12 hours. He was going to need some food soon to replenish his strength. Nakai moved up to a point 20 feet from the 2 guards. The firelight brought their faces into clear perspective, just as the monster's fire had illuminated him. Nakai found it strange that this fire calmed him, while the other had terrified him, even before he had seen the creature warming itself beside the flames. Nakai crouched and stared, taking in the entire scene. These 2 guards were the only men on this part of the perimeter. One of the men wore black-rimmed glasses, while the other had deep-set eyes and a heavy moustache. It seemed that the one with the glasses was supposed to be walking post, but had stopped for the moment. A moment was just enough time for Nakai to get through easily. "Say Figueres," the one with the glasses said, kneeling by the fire. "How about another cup of Java? I got more than an hour to go, and I can hardly keep my eyes open." "You're still on watch, Private," the one sitting by the fire said, his voice deep and strong. "The Major will kill you if he sees you off post." "Man, I can hardly stay awake enough to walk," the man in glasses said, just as Nakai moved past them, silently creeping through the dark night towards the camp below. "Besides, that's a bomb crater over there. People died there, and they don't know exactly what kind of weapon caused it. Ain't no one in his right mind who'd want to be within miles of this spot." Nakai completely agreed with the private. No sane person would want to be here. But at the moment, he knew he was far from sane. There was a monster out there in that desert, and that monster had to be dealt with. His run-in with it only increased his respect for it, and his determination to wipe it off the planet. Gradually, the guards' voices faded. Nakai moved along the edge of the blast crater, keeping down. It was harder to walk here, harder to keep silent. The terrain was forever altered by that explosion. He didn't even want to think about the toxins or other bomb residue he was exposing himself to. He would worry about that later. Right now, he would comfort himself with the thought that the army wouldn't place tents so close to a dangerous site. Yeah, right. It took him about 10 minutes to reach the camp. No one saw him, no one tried to stop him. For that, he was relieved, and a bit worried. If they didn't see him, a man who couldn't make himself invisible, then they would never be able to see the monster. That creature had better stealth capabilities than anything the Department of Defense designed. As Nakai made his way through the tents, he noted their configuration. Anyone who understood the army would know automatically where the colonel's tent would be. Anyone who understood the army knew, of course, that a colonel would be the man with the highest rank here. Anytime there was a danger, the army would send in a colonel to secure the place before risking the generals. The colonel's tent was right where Nakai thought it would be. The tent was larger than all the others, of course. It had 3 sentries on post around it, and inside, a meeting was going on, the light casting odd shadows on the tent. Nakai moved past one sentry without making a sound. The sentry was so oblivious he didn't even notice Nakai's movements in the dark. The army should have its guards trained by men like his grandfather, not the rigid officers who ran the boot camps. The officers created grunts. Nakai's grandfather had taught survival. Nakai cut along the edge of the tent. From inside he could hear voices, some clearer than others. One voice broke over the rest. "I understand what you're saying, sir. The Geiger counters all show very low radiation readings at ground level. But I'm still hesitant to send men in." Nakai nodded to himself. That explained why the camp was so close. The monster's explosion had carried very little radiation with it. He felt more relief than he wanted to acknowledge. The voice went on. "I believe our aerial photographs make it clear that a powerful weapon of some sort was used on the base. A closer inspection is unlikely to yield more data at this time." "I disagree, Major," another voice said as Nakai neared the front flap of the tent. This voice was deeper and clearly carried more authority. "We're still operating in the dark here, and any bit of information we can glean from the blast site is of the utmost importance." Nakai took a deep breath. It was time for him to tell his story. He hoped they would listen to him before they arrested him. He stepped towards the light coming from the tent and went under the open flap. He put his hands up and in clear view for good measure. "Begging the Colonel's pardon, sir," Nakai said as he walked all the way inside. There were 5 men in the large tent, and 4 of them instantly drew pistols, aiming them at him. Only the bald-headed colonel sitting at a paper-covered table didn't move. Nakai stopped, waiting. The interior of the tent smelled of sweat, fear, and cigarette smoke. "How'd you get in here?" A major with red hair barked, his gun not wavering. "I walked into camp, sir," Nakai said, "and the door to this tent was open." "All right, son," the colonel said. "Slowly step into the light and identify yourself." Then, glancing around at the 4 guns leveled at Nakai, he added, "And if I were you, I'd make sure my hands remained visible." Nakai stepped forward and snapped to attention. "Corporal Enoch Nakai, sir. Permanently stationed at Cole. Until yesterday, that is." The colonel rose and moved around the table towards Nakai, motioning for the others to put away their weapons. "You mean to tell me you escaped that blast?" "I had a 3-day pass, sir," Nakai said. "Then why in God's name did you come back here?" The colonel was only inches from him. "Because, sir, they sent me away. They felt I knew too much." "Knew too much?" The colonel's eyes narrowed. "You knew this blast was going to happen?" One of the men brought his gun back up. "No, sir," Nakai said, keeping his eyes on the gun. "But I know what caused it." "You do?" "Yes, sir," Nakai said. "I was there when they brought the craft in, and I've seen the pilot." "Craft? Pilot?" the colonel said. He turned to the major. "Has anyone thought to look through the last few days of reports sent to headquarters from Cole?" The major looked perplexed, then motioned to a corporal, who hurriedly left the tent. "We'd been operating under the assumption that some of Cole's own equipment malfunctioned," the colonel said. "At least, we were hoping that's what happened. Are you saying this was a terrorist attack?" It's not that simple, sir," Nakai said. The colonel nodded, as if pieces he hadn't understood were beginning to come together. He pushed the officer's gun down and pulled out a chair. "Son, it looks as if you have a story to tell us about this explosion." "I do, sir," Nakai said. But believe me, sir, the blast that destroyed this base is the least of our problems.